What exactly is it that's making weak people in the 21st century? Because I think we can all admit that there's a certain lack of je ne sais quoi. There's a certain lack of fortitude, of leadership. I'm kind of thinking about our political leaders, but really in every form of leadership, there's a lack of drive, of ambition, of I have a plan and this is where we're going. Now, a lot of that is the fact that we're all trying to look like we're doing something and we're not actually doing it. But there's a lot of factors that are going into this. I'm going to list out a few, and then I'm going to list out exactly kind of where to go or how to kind of reframe what we're doing at the moment, how to educate ourselves to be a strong person in the 21st century. Now, the first thing that's making us weak is just a surplus of satisfaction, that cheap satisfaction that doesn't actually satisfy. If we can instantly think of like our dating apps. It's like, yeah, we swipe, we match. It's like, oh yeah, okay, and like, you know, that's nice, and they're good looking. It's like, awesome, they seem interesting. And it's like, I'm probably not going to go on a date though. Like, it's like, no, whatever. Just that. It's a little dopamine hit, but like no actual satisfaction and no actual risk. We're not navigating any social situation to do that. It's just this cheap commercial version of what used to be. But we can see this in every, like there's this satisfaction is everywhere, whether it's drugs and alcohol, whether it is the dating sites, whether it is the porn sites, whether it is how we keep up with friends now. We don't necessarily meet up in person as much anymore. Same for family. And even for work as well, we're not necessarily putting our all into it. We're just no. So that's a problem. And it's very closely linked to the second problem, which is a surplus of distractions, because our phone is always on us and it's always ready to go. It's always pinging, it's always dinging, it's always there. And there's a stat there that says that the average attention span for any one given task in work is 20 to 30 seconds. And I think we'll all agree that that is ridiculously low. I don't even know how badly formed that experiment was, but I don't think it could be so badly formed that it found it that low, without something actually going on. So we all kind of know this. This is because technology is a thing. It's not going anywhere. It's something that we're struggling with. If you've seen the Centre for Humane Technology, they are trying to get regulation in to come in and try and combat this attention economy. Because they recognize that we're failing to regulate it ourselves. As customers, as consumers, we're not doing a great job. So there's a few things that we can do to try and empower ourselves, which is to delete the dating apps. And it is to spend less time on the social networks and all the rest. And we know all of this. If you've watched The Social Dilemma, you're up to date on quite a bit of this at least. So I won't spend too much on that. But it is a factor. It is definitely something that is making us weaker in the 21st century. Next thing then I'm going to go into is the fact that cynicism and skepticism is masquerading as wisdom. We're going to places for information, for intelligence, for an elder. And what we're finding is finger pointing. Just that person is corrupt. That person, look at this, they're contradicting themselves. Look at this is so stupid. They get dunked on, they get whatever, these zingers on Twitter, this whole thing of just how stupid is that person. And no one's actually stepping up to fulfill the leadership role. No one's actually saying, hey, they're wrong and this is what we should actually do with a very nuanced argument. It's always this just very titillating debate. It's very satisfying. It's very distracting of like, you know, it's basically Batman in the 90s where it's pow, bang, crash, whatever. And it's just that. And no one's getting anywhere because everyone's saying it's either this side or it's that side. And very few people are saying it is both and. Very few people are saying both sides have a point. Because let's face it, in every debate, both sides are going to have a point, or else they just wouldn't be able to stand on their own 2 feet. So they're going to have some sort of value to offer. So I would encourage you to incorporate some of these synthesizing people. That is so if synthesizing is what you're going to look for, is what you're going to try and search if you're going to look for this, it is your thesis, it is your antithesis, and then it is your synthesis above it, which is recognizing both sides and trying to go beyond it. So hopefully that helps you search and find stuff along those lines. And I do think that kind of helps find genuine wisdom, genuine elders, and people to actually kind of look up to. The next one is going to be, there's only two more. The next one is a hot take. It's just for fun, and I'm going to say it because I can't not. And that is that we're having relationships later in life. And that sounds strange, and I don't mean to offend anyone, but it is just the fact that our intimate relationships are a big part of what kind of softens out our edges. It's a big part of what makes us more sociable. Maybe I'm talking from a guy's perspective here, because let's admit it, women are far more sociable than men, and men are basically cavemen dragging their knuckles when it comes to social situations. We tend to be brash and a bit naive, I suppose, to all perspectives in a given situation. We don't necessarily account for people's feelings quite as well. So I do think just having that threshold pushed further back, and the fact that also then like long-term relationships just aren't as popular, and they're not lasting as long, and that whole thing, I do believe plays a part in it. I don't know how much, but I thought it was worth mentioning. The last one then, back to a serious point, is that there is a lack of embodiment. That is to say that we don't actually occupy this vessel too often. We're constantly abstracting. We're above our heads. We are outside of ourselves. Whether this is in our soaps, in our reality TV. For me, it's in my philosophy. I'm constantly thinking about whether teleportation is living or dying. It's my favorite. It's my favorite argument there. But we're just constant. Like the internet itself is a marketplace of ideas. It is outside of ourselves. The metaverse is a thing that's coming, or like it's around, but like its true implications are yet to be seen. So we're spending a lot of time outside of ourselves, and that's not good for our nervous system. It's really not. There's sound therapy, there's touch therapy, there's a lot of things that do recognize that we need to kind of center ourselves back here. But for the general public, we don't recognize this. We just indulge in the ideas because we are a knowledge economy. That is what we are. So I can't fault it, but we need to integrate the physical. We need to integrate ourselves. And there's a big push in the gym, in neo-spirituality, in being mindful, in being present. There's a big push in that because people do recognize that they're missing a certain thing from their life and they're trying to fulfill it in these ways. So again, I would just say try and make sure that you are being physical. Try and make sure that if you can do meditation, I would highly recommend. I do think it's a core practice. And just other things that try and center you back down and give you a moment peace away from the treadmill, the rat race, the whatever else. Excuse me. So that is essentially my thesis for exactly what's making us weaker. It is all of these things combined. It is that over satisfaction, so we don't have drive for ourselves. It is that over distraction, so we can't actually focus on one thing to make us stronger because we're just constantly getting distracted. It is that cynicism masquerading as wisdom, so we don't even know what wisdom is anymore. It is the later relationships which are making us less good at navigating social situations, and it is the lack of embodiment that we really need to bring in. I do think that's a very core part. I do think if we embodied more, that we'd solve quite a few of the other problems. I do think it kind of centers around this escapism, trying to escape ourselves, trying to escape this body, this life, this whatever else. So the solution, what is it? What is it that makes a strong person? If we're saying that these things are making us weak, what is it that makes us strong? Because we don't want to be cynical and trying to masquerade that as wisdom, do we? And the answer is actually wisdom itself. It is that focus, because this is really important. If I can get this across, I'll be chuffed. And that is that we are in a knowledge economy. what used to be intelligence isn't quite it anymore. Because, give me a second here. Beforehand, like all through our history, for the last thousands of years, it has been the person who can process the most information. Because there wasn't that much information around. We needed to know the trees, know the tracks, know the landscape, know the social circles. We needed to know as much as we could. And that was what made us powerful. That's what made us formidable. And someone who was capable of stepping up into leadership. Now we're saturated with information. We have so much. So now we actually have to change our game plan. We need to change what we think of, what we think intelligence is. Because it's no longer just processing information, gathering information. We are no longer squirrels for information. Now it's about trying to find out what's relevant. Now it's trying to sort out the wheat from the chaff. It is trying to make that distinction of what is worth your attention and what is not. That's a massive shift. Massive. Because every bit of infrastructure, the culture, everything that we build ourselves upon, which is like our schools, the shops, like everything, our music, all of it is built towards gathering information, going towards a certain direction. And now we need to say, no, we need to empower the individual to sort out what's relevant for them, because there's just too much information. And if you're trying to use the old version, if you're trying to use that old framing of gathering as much information to push forward, to make that work, you will have to censor. You will have to get rid of the rest of the information and focus people towards a given direction. And I don't want that. So I want to bring it back to the people, allow that freedom, and say, how are you, train ourselves to find what's relevant in the world. And that's a big ask. And that is, so here's the difference though. Intelligence is that, again, gathering of information. It is what you know. Wisdom is how you know it. How did you find this out? Because that generalizes throughout. That generalizes through life. That's what's able to help you find what is relevant. So here's a little experiment that they do in psychology, and that is there is a pond with a lily pad in it, and every day the lily pads double. So on the first day there's 1, second day there's 2, third day there's 4, next day there's 8, and so on and so forth. It takes 20 days for the pond to fill up with lily pads. On what day is the pond half full? Now most people will say 10, because there's just quick math there, and that's the way they go. That's not the answer. The answer is 19, because again, the lily pads double every day. So the day before it would have been half, and then the 20th day it would have been full. The reason I point this out is because our intelligence is kind of quick heuristics of finding patterns and problem solving and all the rest. We need to kind of take a step back and be truly rational and sort out what's relevant again. And then that we need to take a step back further and say, how do we become more rational? That's the way I formulate it in my head. That's strongly influenced by John Vervaeke, but it is me butchering it, so don't hold on to that. If you're truly interested in cultivating wisdom, I would highly recommend going on to his Awakening from the Meaning Crisis series. It is 50 hours, it is long, it is well worth your time. But essentially we are trying to focus on how we come about, to value that, because that's the thing. We need to stop valuing what we know. We need to stop identifying with what we know. Because the minute we identify with it, then we defend it irrationally. Then we go to war. Then we do all the stupid things that humans do. So if we take pride in how we know things, that makes us much more flexible, which is what's needed. There's an old saying amongst thought leaders that says that you should have strong beliefs held weakly, not weak beliefs held strongly. And that's exactly that. like fight for your belief, like really do stand by it. But the minute that people rationally kind of deconstruct it or find a flaw, adapt, take that on, figure out how you're coming to your conclusion and how it might be flawed and how all the rest. If you focus on the how and you take pride in that, then the fact that you were wrong in a certain given situation just doesn't hurt as much. And that's really where we're trying to get to. If we are to take that idea serious, that we want to value how we know things and not what we know, we really need to be conscious of our biases. Because our biases are things, they're heuristics that work most of the time. Most of the time, this car in the left lane will go left or will go straight. But every now and then, some donkey goes right because they made a mistake. And we need to be adaptable to that. That's a very everyday situation of just an assumption that we make. But there's some really hardwired biases that we have, such as our confirmation bias, that we take in the information that we agree with far more readily than we do than information that disagrees with what we believe. That is a bias that we need to compete with, that we need to sensitize ourselves with and say, hey, am I being biased here? Do I need to open myself up? Do I need to consciously open myself up? Because that is what's needed, is a conscious shift. Right now, you have the Russian invasion of Ukraine, and I'm being conscious, or I'm being sensitive to my bias, because what I'm hearing at the moment is a load of anti-Russian rhetoric, which is fair, as in, I'm not trying to excuse it at all, but I'm only hearing one side there, and that makes me just pause for a second, and maybe I'll find out that I'm totally wrong. Maybe I'll find out that he has lost his marbles. I don't know. But I'm not going to jump in. It's a couple of days into that conflict and everyone has an opinion and everyone's posting photos up in their profiles of I stand by and all of the rest. And I'm just kind of okay, let's admit that geopolitics is a very complicated subject. And if we do want to talk about it, we should probably look that up. We are coming out of COVID, kind of, and it was the same thing there, where it was all one side and no one gave space for kind of any sort of dissenting opinions or views. Again, because we're not really empowering the individual to figure out what's relevant for them. We are trying to narrow it down so that we can stick with that old model of just gathering as much information. This is why it works. 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 Why aren't you following me? This is why it works. This is why it works. This is why it works. And that model, I don't like it. It might work. It might work out, honestly, as in when I say work out, I mean it might keep civilization going, but I just don't like how that works, of censoring everything else for the purpose of just keeping us in one direction. I just don't like it. So returning back, getting us to realize what is relevant, becoming wise ourselves, aiming to become wise, not aiming to become rich by the time we're 30, not aiming to retire by the time we're 40, aiming to become the wise 50-year-old, aiming to become that elder that people turn to, that people look to, that can offer sage advice, is an ideal that we should have. I'm not saying that we're all going to hit it. I'm not saying that everyone should hit it or anything like that, but just that we have that blueprint in our head so that we understand that is a direction worth following, worth admiring. So I am going to leave that there for today. I hope this empowers you. So again, we'll do a quick reflection on this. It is oversatisfaction, over distraction, that your cynicism masquerading as weakness, your delayed relationships, but just kind of your social navigation skills in general being a bit less, and a lack of embodiment. And then what we want to try and do is we want to try and embody wisdom. We want to try to look at how we know things, not what we know. We want to take pride in how we know things, not what we know. Because We are here for discovery. We are here to be explorers. We are here to find out that we're wrong. Because if I'm not wrong, if I know everything already, God, that's miserable. We don't want to be there. We want to explore. We want to be Columbus. We want to be Napoleon, whoever. We want to be the person who goes out and finds and conquers and comes back and enriches. And we want to do that on a psychological level, on a spiritual level perhaps. So I am going to leave that there. I recognize now that this is still quite abstract. As in the problem that I am describing here is very big. It's an existential problem. It is something that will take all of us to try and navigate. So it more than likely would take a change in how we teach people in schools, in colleges, or perhaps not. Maybe it's going to be in schools you learn as much information. You do that old process where you just gather information so that you can stretch out your brain. Your brain's a muscle, so just work it out, make it big, make it strong. But there will need to be a transition phase somewhere. Maybe it's your tweens, maybe whatever else. I don't know exactly where we want to place it as a society, or where science says it's best to place it, or anything like that. But a place where we switch from trying that old version of intelligence to this new version of intelligence, which is finding what's relevant and not getting distracted. So I hope you were able to get something from this video. If you did, hit like, hit subscribe please. I do appreciate it. And I will see you in the next one. Bye guys.